So I've just started a new web page, but it's not up right now. I'm still doing some more things, and it'll go up at the beginning of next month. Now that's a painting of me by my father when I was 11 years old. He was a portrait painter. He was also an officer in the Air Force. So when we traveled, he would paint people there. He did the official portrait of Chiang Kai-shek when we were in Formosa. And he did some governors and generals and big murals and Western sculpture, and somehow raised 4 kids and had a full-time job. I don't know how he did all that. So there I am painting an Indian chief on horseback. Yeah, there's one of my, that's a pastel. No, that's an oil. And he always looked like he was, and he did. He would swing around on that thing and run around, and so I kind of got him with that sense of that he was a very active little boy, and that's a pastel. And she had been in Spain for a semester and had just gotten back and had a backpack and that tank top and jeans. And somehow she had that gold scarf in her backpack. So we rigged that up, a bit of Caravaggio or kind of a Spanish look. And he was a professor at Vanderbilt. He was voted the most popular professor in the school, in the law school there, 9 times. So they renamed or added his name to the name of the award. And unfortunately, I probably shouldn't say this, but he got early onset Alzheimer's, and he was brilliant and died 2 years later. But he had quite the presence and kind of a devilish wit, and very entertaining. So I just sat in the back of his class and filmed him for a while, and then he posed quite a few times. Oh, and that was an oil, and this is pastel. And she's an artist now. I'm not sure where she is, but she went to art school. A lot of my little kids that I painted were kind of my children. I've never had children. My wife and I were unable to have them. So she is looking at an art book and kind of looking up at you, dressed in her Sunday best. And that tree, I kind of worked as an Arthur Rackham reference. Children's storybooks. He was an illustrator and did all his gnarly old trees with the faces and things. And I tried to do a little of that. And he was the dean at the Washington University Law School. Okay. And this won first place in a national competition in 1991. And I didn't think I was good enough to enter anything at that point. I had started about 10 years earlier, but that surprised me. This one, it's a detail of a larger painting. It's 30 by 40. And I did that all from life in my studio, and moved. They were up on a table, which was a modeling stand, carpeted. And then I built the backdrop and painted it and hung all that stuff and the Victorian furniture. And that was the grandfather. He was looking at his favorite granddaughter. And it's in a gigantic gilded frame. It's gorgeous. So I've got it in the den here. This was a recent one. It's 40 inches tall by 60 inches wide. It's the panther, the Greek god Dionysius, better known as Bacchus, hence the grapes there, would ride around on, and they would create mayhem and mischief. And he was known as the god of chaos and madness, but also wine and theater and art. And I guess the theme is that, if you have some wine, it makes you feel good and kind of but if you have too much, you can kind of go crazy. And that's, I put faces all throughout. And I made this all up. I studied all these different pictures of leopards and Mount Olympus and caves and rocks and grapes and, but I put faces everywhere, and the grapevine and in the rocks, and he's coming out of the cave, which symbolizes chaos. And, so it was a very interesting assignment. And the biggest painting I think I've ever done.
So I don't think I'm going to talk specifically about I think these are images from my website. I've been painting portraits for about 25 years. I've been with agencies for about 17 years. I worked on my own until my first child was born, and I sent my work in to get into agencies, and they rejected me. And so I went for a while on my own. And then I had a friend of a friend that said, hey, I know someone who works at this agency, and I think we should connect you to. So she ended up connecting me with Portrait South, and I got on right away with her, and she said, if you do well on this first commission, we'll consider representing you. And that was sort of history. I got on with them, and within probably like the first 3 months, I went to one of their meetings, and at the time my husband was working, and we had my first child who was less than 1, and I called home and I said, I think I want you to quit your job, because when I get back, I'm going to have so much work. I'm not going to know what to do. So he quit his job. He was excited. Can you guys hear me? Am I breaking up?
You're fine.
Am I? Okay. Yeah. So that's sort of what started commissions going. And since then, that, like I said, my son was a newborn, and he's now 17 years old. So Chad quit his job, and since then it's been a really great life with the agencies. Their cut is 40%. But for me, I think it got me into circles of people that I may not have been into. And so in that way, I was able to raise my prices pretty continuously, sort of year after year. And I've been booked up. Typically, I'm booked up for about a year, and I've been booked up sometimes up to 2 years. And when it gets to 2 years, I know at one point I had, I think I had 50 something portraits, and that was a little much. And so at that point, that's when you raise your prices to try to slow things down. I have my own clients as well, which is nice, because then obviously you make 40% more. But this was 20 years ago, and when we were talking to Holly and Mark before, things have changed a lot in the world of social media. And years ago, to promote yourself, I would do shows and things that, that's really, it's a full-time job to do the marketing aspect of it. But now things are changing, and I think with Facebook and Instagram and social media, it makes it a little bit easier to then get the ball rolling. And once you get into some communities of people that have money for portraits, then their friends see you, and their friends' friends see you. And just like Holly said, that it sort of gets things rolling, and it's exponential how many people that can see your work. But I've had a wonderful relationship. I'm with several agencies. I'm with Portraits Inc. now, which Birmingham, Alabama had bought out the Portraits Inc. in New York. And so now they're the same company. I was with an agency, Portrait South, for 15 plus years, and then they went under, and a lot of the reps that were with their company and then created new companies. I've also done like finder's fees with galleries, or even like dress shops and just people that would be, have the clientele that I have. Like on Instagram, if you find a boutique or a shop, just kind of ally yourself with other. I do a lot of family portraits. Am I breaking up, guys? Can you hear me?
Froze for a second.
Okay, sorry. But I'm rambling. I've been doing portraits for 20 years, and it's been a great life. I get to do what I love, and people pay me a lot of money, so I cannot complain. So if we want to open it up to questions afterwards too, I'm open.
So I'm Holly Henson, and I live and work in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been painting for about 25 years or so. I wasn't, I didn't train in art in school. And as a matter of fact, my degree and my background is in math. It's what I majored in college. And I studied philosophy. And I came out of school and I took a technical job at a consulting firm here in Atlanta, which is now called Accenture. And I programmed computers for about 8 years. And it was a good company, and I like technical problem solving, but it was really stressful and it was very demanding. And I started painting as like an outlet to, the kind of the stress and the demands of the job that I had. And I would take classes when I could in the evenings, on the weekends, and I would paint whenever I could, which at first wasn't a lot, but I, found like more ways to make more time for it, and painted and learned, from different people over the course of a number of years until I started taking commissions. And that was like in the early, 2000s. And at that time, I was married. I didn't have any children. And I was probably splitting my time between like 50% personal work and 50% commissions. And most of those were portraits. But, it was before I had a website, but it was before any social media or anything. And, my ways of getting commissions, which I think would still, a lot of them be valid now, were just different at the time. In 2005, I had a child. I had my first child, and there were a few years that I took a break from commissions, and I kept painting, and I did some personal work. I painted my children, but I was, I had a lot going on, and my husband and I were moving. We moved out of the country for a while. We moved back. And after they got a little bit older, I kind of had a moment where, it was probably like for me, like in terms of a marketing perspective, the most like a turning point where I was like, okay, my kids are getting a little older now and I have more time. And this is, the commissions are what I want, to do with my time. Like I didn't really want to do as much splitting of personal work and commission work. And I really wanted to go for like, marketing myself and getting as many portrait commissions as I could. And so that's kind of when I like really dug into the marketing stuff. And that's what I do now. I paint, I only this past year did a little bit of personal work, but most of what I do are commissions. Most of them, I would say about 80% are portraits. I also paint sometimes some birds or floral commissions. And that's kind of my story. That's what I spend all of my time on now. As my website is down right now, so having a good website is really important, and I don't have one at the moment. But Margaret has some good, some pictures of my work. And this first one was one I did last year. And I painted 4 children in this same family last year. the boy before, he's in Jackson, Mississippi, which is where I'm from. This girl, she was 13 when I painted her portrait, and she lives in Birmingham. She is one of 4 children, and the second child in that family, I know it's kind of distorted, you can't see it, but is actually right behind me. I just finished painting her younger sister, and I'm waiting for that to be at a point where I can varnish it. So all of these kids are going to have their portraits made or have had them when they're 13. So 13 years old and 13 years old, and then 2 more children. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about this project, I think, in a bit, but 2 years before, I was commissioned to paint 4 boys in the same family. I'm sorry, 6 boys in the same family. And it was a blended family, and he is the youngest of 2 brothers. And I got to travel to different parts of Alabama and Mississippi and meet these kids where they were, which was in college or young professional life or late high school. And they all sat for me, and they were just amazing kids. This little girl was just maybe one of the cutest kids I've ever seen. I think a lot of you have seen this painting before. Her name is Mim, and that is her dog Scout. When I did a photo shoot for their portrait, and so many of my pictures came out just with the 2 of them, like all over each other, her laying on the dog, and they had this really wonderful relationship. But she is part of the family of the boy that you saw in the initial picture, and they live in Jackson, Mississippi. Okay, this little girl, I painted her and her sister a few years later. They are in Atlanta. And this is one of the few commissions, when we talk about marketing later, I'll talk more about, like, most of my commissions come from friends or friends of friends, friends of relatives. In this case, this commission came to me through an art gallery owner here in Atlanta who doesn't really specialize in commissions, but we do have a professional arrangement, where he's, sometimes he brings me clients that I wouldn't have otherwise have known of or have met because they've come to him looking for a portrait artist. And as it turned out, this little girl lives in the neighborhood right next door to me, but I didn't know her. And we had mutual connections, and she's 5. She's 5 in this picture. She was a doll. This is another 13-year-old girl. 13 is a popular age for me for portraits, and because it's kind of like a threshold milestone age. And I love kids at this age. So she's also in Atlanta, and I had painted her brother when he was 13, and then a few years ago it was her turn. And if you guys were at the last exhibit, this painting was there. Okay, and then this is another this is the older boy, the older brother of one of the previous one that you guys saw. And he was the oldest of the group of kids I painted. He was 24 years old. Really kind of introspective, intelligent, interesting guy to talk to. And this is a little girl I painted, and I happen to be related to her. She's my first cousin's daughter. I painted her and her little dog Scout together. And Scout died. Scout was an old dog and died a few months after this painting, after this was delivered. And he had been kind of like their first child. I mean, Scout had been like the first child. So it was really emotional for them to lose the dog. And they were great really sweet girl.
Okay, this is kind of a close-up of the new website that I've been working on. And it's bigger than that. But one thing I really like is that it shows up well on any device. So on a phone or an iPad or a big screen. And I'm still adding things. I've been going back through about, I don't know, 20 years of about 50,000 pictures that I've taken and of my work and various things, and trying to find things that I can include from my early life. And I've seen some really good websites, and it's kind of interesting when you can tell a story about who you are and how you started, and what inspired you to become an artist and all that. So that's what I'm working on. Hopefully it'll be early February. There's another picture of the first opening page. And then these are some of the other pages, and you can scroll down and see more, but I just sent pictures of what I could, take pictures of with my iPad. Since it's still under construction, I'm still adding pictures. I've met a lot of interesting people. That's Barbara Mandrell. I did her family. And anyway, she was a nice lady. And those were, I think, 48 by 36. So you can get an idea of scale. And that's me in my younger days with more hair. Okay, and one thing I just did, with Moo, I'd been thinking about getting some decent business cards, and so I put 50 different portrait pictures on 50 different cards, and then I'm going to contact the people who the cards belong, the portraits belong to, and give them some business cards with the picture of their paintings on the cards, and then tell them that if they have other people who are interested, and I'll make more if they need them and all that. But it'll also give me a chance to reestablish contact with some people that I've kind of not maintained a close connection with. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced how you become part of the family and a trusted friend and often a confidant. They tell, especially the wives, tell me all sorts of things. And I don't talk about other people to any of them, because they all seem to know each other a lot of times. And they're from all over the country. But I thought that would be a good idea. And then if you show the other side, I added a QR code, which I've thought about doing, and I figured out how to do it. And if people take a picture and focus on that, it'll, a pop-up will show a link. And if they touch that, it'll take me directly to the website, take them to it. So I thought that could be really cool. And anyway, right now, I haven't given any business cards out yet because that QR code doesn't connect to anything yet. But starting next month, that's what I'll be doing. And I've still got a few commissions, but it's definitely slowed down in these last couple of years. And the last client, I've been doing children of children lately, the third generation sometimes, since I'm 70 now and I'm getting up there. It's amazing how seeing these children grow up, and several of them have become artists. Yeah, you become a trusted confidant, and that's really valuable. And that's the part I think, to be a good painter of a portrait, you have to be very fascinated by people and their lives and their stories. And, I really try and understand who they are and put that into the portrait, and then surround them with things that represent their world. And, I have basic prices for the sizes, but I also add more for a background. So that's how that works. Oh, and the logo, I just came up with that. And this is my commission agreement form, the next, yeah. And I noticed, well, one thing I when it says the date of first sitting, approximate, things are so fluid, especially these days. And so, you can say spring or something like that. And I don't, often, give them an end date. Usually I'm working on several things at once, and their schedules are busy. And I did have one client, a lawyer, who wrote, sent a thing when he signed it at the bottom, all these legal things about, it had to be done by a certain date. And if I didn't do this, and, all these different terms that, legally I had to satisfy. Well, he became one of my best clients, and I'm doing 9 of his grandchildren now. So, and they keep adding more. So that worked out. And I made sure I met those terms, but most people aren't like that. So I don't do that. And I also don't guarantee that, well, they have to be satisfied, but I've never had to do a refund or anything. And I just work until, usually I'm the one that's hard to please. And I go on and give them a lot more than they were expecting. So that's, I think, about it. I just feel like these days you have to let people know that, me especially when I'm getting older, that I'm still alive and I'm still painting and enjoying it and healthy. And so you have to let people know and just get it out there in every which way you can. I've never used agents or brokers or galleries. It's always been word of mouth. When I won first place in '91, Portrait Sync wanted to represent me. And then I already had a bunch of commissions, and that magazine, Southern something or other, that all the portrait artists they came to me and wanted me to advertise. And I told them how many commissions I already had. And they said, well, I guess you don't really need to advertise. So I didn't. And fortunately, it's just been good, all word of mouth. And I feel less pressured that way. I did go to an open house near here in Belmead, and in a really nice house. And one of the portrait brokers was there with a selection of portraits. And the way she described, what you should look for, a good portrait, and yeah, I could have some hands in it, but, that shouldn't be the focus. And so there shouldn't be much detail in the hands. And, I looked at some of them, and the hands looked like they didn't have any bone structure. There was no good anatomy. A lot of them looked like they had been painted very quickly. And they also didn't really recommend any particular artist that I could tell. And they would come to shows that I would be in, by myself with a big notebook full of artists. And, people would flip through and say, oh yeah, I think I'll go with you because you've got such a nice selection. And from what I could tell, they weren't really recommending any particular person. They didn't really care. And I've heard, I don't know, not good stories about representation. And I did have one interior decorator get me a client in Kentucky. And when I went and delivered it, I gave her a brochure and it listed my prices. And she said, I paid twice as much for this portrait. And I thought, what? Because I was giving, the interior decorator a 10% commission, and she was getting another, 50% or 100% or whatever that would be. I got really mad. And so I decided, I could do it myself. So that's my experience. I'm sure a lot of you have had good experiences, and I could probably charge more if I was with a broker, but I don't really see that they do that much for the 40%. And hopefully I can just keep painting. Okay.
I am, I'm not as prolific as Melissa and Mark over the years. And what I might be able to like bring to the discussion is, you know, some of the, you know, I feel like I'm hustling a lot. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of different people on this call. People are probably in different places, maybe, you know, just getting started on commissions. Maybe some people do a lot of commissions. But for me, like where I was a number of years ago, when I kind of made this decision that I wanted to, you know, pretty much do all the commissions I could handle, I was, you know, I'm not represented, and I had to kind of come up with a plan. And what I did, I revisit each year, and it's like, I just thought I would share, you know, my kind of simple process for hustling. And it's, so what I did that year is I wrote down, you know, any commissions that I did have a few commissions, you know, that I'd already committed to. So I made a list of like what that was. And then I made a separate list of potential commissions. And these were people that you guys probably have all run into, you know, people make comments like, oh, one day I really want to get one of those. Or, you know, when my daughter's just the right age, I'm, you know, really, I'm saving up, you know, I'm hoping to do a portrait. Or, you know, somebody that kind of like dropped a hint that this might be something that they were looking for in the future. If, you know, I would write those down as like, these are potential commissions. And I started following, because at the time, you know, my list of things I'd committed to wasn't as long, you know, I needed it to be longer. So I started following up with those and kind of, you know, hey, you know, you mentioned a while back, you know, I wanted you to know, you know, maybe I just decided to discount, or, you know, or something like that, to see if I wanted to build a portfolio. And so I started turning some of those things into actual commissions. And then, you know, I could kind of like grow my list of what I had, you know, the work that I had. And, you know, what I thought through at the time was, what kind of commissions would I be willing to take? Because I think everybody's gotten the, you know, the question of like, well, I'd really love a commission of my grandfather, but all I have is this really old picture and, you know, this other picture of him. And could you put these two together? And, you know, things that are kind of like blow your mind a little bit. But, you know, I mean, I understand why people would ask that. If you haven't made a painting, then it might seem like, you know, why not? But if you have made a painting, you know, you're kind of like thinking, no, I can't do that. I can't do that and, you know, not make this person look like a Frankenstein. So, you know, I was thinking of like, what is my edge? And I think that's like a good question to ask yourself is, you know, for me, I also did more than people. I painted a lot of birds and I painted florals, and I was willing to take commissions on, even though I really wanted to focus on people and I wanted to market myself as a portrait artist. And that's about 80%, I would say, or more of what I do. But then like there's this kind of edge of things. And if you're hungry for work and if you're trying to build a portfolio, what, you know, how you make a decision of how you want to play with that. Like I saw an artist that I really love do a portrait, you know, a posthumous portrait of a woman for Princeton Theological Seminary. It's Joseph Daly. And he did a painting of the first woman to graduate from seminary. Her name is Muriel Jennings. And he had to use an old photo of her, you know, a headshot that was like sepia toned. And he used his wife as a model, and he like set up, you know, he made it absolutely beautiful. So sometimes, you know, these requests that seem kind of daunting, you know, if you talk to the client, you know, like maybe there is some place to go there. And that's where I was kind of initially, like, I'm not going to really say no yet. You know, I'm going to explore some things that might otherwise seem out of range for me. So I use that to like build my list and to start like kind of getting a backlog of things to do. And I still didn't take on everything, but I definitely went into areas that I would not have gone into before. And it gave me a chance sometimes to kind of get people to where I wanted them to be. So like I had one woman who wanted me to paint from some old photos of her new husband's children when they were young. And I said, well, they're so beautiful now. I mean, and they absolutely were these gorgeous teenage girls. I said, you know, what would you think about doing a painting of them now? Because they actually get the experience of having their portrait painted. And, you know, it's a more like full experience for them. And, you know, I was able to kind of sell what I thought, you know, would be the best kind of painting to her and get to paint something that I wanted. So some of these discussions of things that didn't seem like I would have been the right thing to take on, or maybe wouldn't have been a good painting or very interesting to do, turned into paintings that I really wanted to do. So I think that's a good thing to think about is like, what do you want? Do you want to be like a specific niche, or do you want, you know, to kind of look at a lot of things if you're early on in the stage? And
if I could comment too, Holly, I'm interested because you're painting a lot of adolescents, which is really cool. And I think that's because you've done paintings of them. I paint a lot of 4 to 7-year-olds, and I'm wanting to paint other ages. And I think you have to have those things in your portfolio for people to see them because they don't visualize. Mark?
Yeah, I've done some. It's an awkward age sometimes. You have to get them right at the point before they get too
In your experience,
self-conscious.
if you paint more adults and people see that, they're coming.
Right. Yeah, you know, like I did a girl in a flower garden, and suddenly I just got all these blonde girls in lacy dresses and flower gardens. You know, I was just overwhelmed with them. And then I got one, the boy was just wearing shorts, nothing else. And the girl was wearing a t-shirt. You know, they were kind of hippies. Their dad built beautiful, magnificent houses, but he was definitely a hippie. And that was so much fun. And yeah, you get a portrait professor, a law professor, and then suddenly you start getting other law, you know, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I would say that if you're, you know, if you're kind of like building a plan for yourself, it's a really good thing to think about, what do you want to get more work of?
Right.
Because that might be the thing that you paint a sample of, or you give someone a discount, you know, to do a portrait of them because you really want that like portrait in your portfolio. And, you know, you may not have to do it for free as a sample. Like maybe you can work something out where, you know, you get paid at a discount. But yeah, think about like, what is that, you know, if you were to like wind up in a niche or if you wanted to be known for a certain thing, what is that? And then that's kind of where you would like want to drive people to when they see your work. Maybe it's like your feature on your website, or it's the thing that keeps showing up on Facebook, or, you know, it's your profile picture, you know, whatever it is, it's your business card, and you'll probably get more of it. Before I had kids, you know, if I go back a bit, I was painting portraits then. And I found myself in this niche of painting these small, like square 12 by 12 portraits of grandchildren for their grandmothers. And it was, you know, it was nice. I mean, they were little kids, but you can kind of get known for like doing a certain kind of thing. And if you enjoy it, I mean, that's great. It helps like with marketing it, because grandmothers would say, oh, you've got to have these, like you got to get your grandkids painted. You've got to get this person to paint your grandkids. And then, you know, they kind of start to like market themselves. But if you're making the choice, you know, on yourself and you're thinking about like, what do I want to go for? you would think about, what do I want out there that I would hope to market itself for there to be more of.
So Holly, when you said that, how do you market to grandparents? Do you do something specifically?
What I did, this is really going back a lot of years. So at that time, I was in my 20s, and I did some paintings of some young, I would never do this painting now. And I would not, I mean, it was good. I was proud of it at the time. I mean, I think we all have work like that. We're like, was proud of it at the time. But I had this older picture of my brother when he was young, and I did a painting of it, and I made it into a card, and I gave it to my mom, who was in her 50s at the time. And she gave it to all of her tennis friends, and, they like spread them out over, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. So that's luck in and of itself, because a lot of people, do traditional types of, a lot of people value portraits in the South, and, Mississippi and Birmingham and Nashville and Atlanta. But that was, back before there was a lot of social media marketing. And I still think cards would work really well. Like, I love Mark's business cards, because I still love to have something in my hand. And I still think doing, a note card or a business card or something that can be handed out is a great marketing tool. And it really was for me at the time, because it got me, my first few clients. And these were women like in their mid 50s, starting to have grandchildren. And it was, and then it kind of like turned into a thing, because they started to market themselves. But now I would say that's kind of the case a lot for some of these teenagers. I think everybody kind of, wherever you are kind of in your life, with your, you may have children or parents or something that can help you market. For me, one of the things that's been, and I think I'm kind of getting ahead of like some of the things I thought might be interesting to share, but I would say the biggest tool for me, the thing that's brought me the most business is just my personal Facebook page. Not like marketing on a professional page or on, my website, Instagram. It's just like sharing what I do and sharing my love for it. And like Mark was saying, like, it's really beneficial to be curious about people and interested in their lives, and to really, I think, kind of be fascinated by people. I mean, I'm not like super extroverted person. I think extroverted people really have an advantage in this area, but I am really curious about people. And so just sharing my work as, this is what I do, and I love the process of it, and I love the people I paint, has probably brought me more business. And
what does
turn out to be teenagers because of my age and the age of my, people, my peer group and their kids.
Holly and Melissa and Mark, while you're talking about marketing strategies here, we've got some questions about pricing. How do you price? What's your strategy for pricing? And also a question about how do you adjust that for the area where the commission comes from, whether it's a rural area or a Atlanta area. Does the pricing vary across the country, or how do you do that? Can you guys address that?
Well, when I first started, I just started sketching people and charging almost nothing. And then I saw one of my clients in a department store, and she bought a purse for much more than I was charging for the portrait. And I thought, I need to raise my prices. So I raised them probably about tenfold, because at first I was just I didn't know what else to do. I had done other things before. I did architecture and design and built homes in Estes Park, and had with a group that I met in college. We had 3 restaurants, and I did that for about 10 years. And then once that was all done and I was wondering what I should do, I just, I thought, well, I don't know. I really like I grew up painting with my father, and I thought, well, I'll just start drawing people. And then I started, doing pastels, and then I started doing oil paintings. And I found that, well, I look at other people's work that I admire and try and see if, who I relate to and what they're charging. And oftentimes I'm probably undercharging because I put a lot of work. I don't paint that many a year. I'm not one to want to just crank them out. And I really experiment and try and learn as much as I can and try new things. And so that involves a lot of studying and reading and, studying with different people, and also just looking what's online. You can do that, and looking at videos, and then you start gauging, what is a portrait worth. And one thing I've discovered is that usually people who get portraits can afford to pay almost any price. At least the people I paint are in the 1%. And I could charge more. In fact, sometimes they'll pay me more, and they'll say, well, you're not charging enough here. Let me give you a little more. And so I probably need to re-examine what I'm charging. And I don't know, you just have to go with what you feel comfortable with and build your skills and your portfolio, and don't undersell yourself. They don't need your support, which is what you're doing if you don't charge enough. You're giving them more money that you should be getting.
I was going to say that I'm quite similar in the sense of like a starting out pricing strategy, like looking around to see what other people are doing. And I started out low because in the beginning, I was like, am I going to get it? I think it was, there's some of it was building confidence a little bit. And, but I do go up when I'm booked out further than 12 months. And that's been the case a lot lately, but I don't go up. I try to go up pretty slowly so I can, test it out and see if that's, if that's reasonable, if I'm still getting work. But one thing I would say that might be a little, in my case, that's a little different than Mark's experience is I think I do get a good amount of business from like the not 1%. Most of my clients are not people who could afford to pay anything. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I think it has something, maybe it has something to do with the way I'm marketing. But I've had a lot of people that are, just kind of in the same place that most people, many people are, like weighing the cost of what, buying a portrait versus other things in life. But the key is making them realize like how truly special like having a portrait is. And, how it's not just maybe one, and this is my opinion, it's not just like one other thing in your art collection. I mean, portraits have a really special place, and people will buy them, I think, that don't collect other art, or, maybe don't have a lot of antique, nice furniture or whatever, because they know they start to realize the more they see it and the more they talk to you, that this is like the thing they're going to grab when they're, if their house is on fire, after they get the cat, they're going to grab the portrait and, when they're running out of the house. And sometimes I make it easier, or I try to make it easier for people by, if I feel like cost is something that the price might be something they're sensitive to, I let them know that we can set up a payment plan. Because like my typical strategy is 40% at the time of the sitting, and then the remainder when the painting is delivered. So I let them know that we can break that down into more than 2 payments, you know, and we can kind of work through it. And I've had people take advantage of that. School teachers, nurses, you know, people that are to say, I'm going to pay you a little bit each month when I get my paycheck. And then when we get to that point, you know, I'm looking forward to getting my portrait. And I love that. I love when someone who can't afford to buy anything invests in having a portrait made of someone that they love. I think it's a really worthwhile thing to save up for.
Holly, do you do a commission agreement or any kind of a written contract with your clients?
I mean, I wouldn't recommend not doing one, but I don't do one. So, you know, people say that you should always have a contract. And I think you should listen to those people. Everyone that I work for with, you know, everyone that I do commissions for, and I'm trying to think if there are any exceptions, are people that I know personally, or they're, you know, someone I know through someone else. And, you know, when we do 40% at the sitting, so I know they're invested, you know, I know they're not, you know, going to walk away. I know that they're invested in this. And, you know, I don't recommend that as a business practice, but in the years I've done portraits, I've never had an issue.
I've been a little flexible occasionally, but it usually wasn't because of the money. I had this one woman, she wanted to surprise her husband with a portrait of herself. She didn't really want that. She didn't think she was pretty, and she was gorgeous. You know, a lot of pretty women don't understand how other people see them, but so she squirreled away, or, you know, took money from some rental property, and that he never noticed that she wasn't depositing, and gave it to me instead. And then Christmas Day, he was upstairs putting the children, you know, bathing the children upstairs, who I'd already painted one of them. And he came down Christmas Day, you know, and I snuck in and hung the portrait, and he came down and saw it and just broke out crying. And she said for days she wouldn't be able to find him, and he'd just be staring at the portrait. He was so pleased and moved. And, you know, that was so much fun for me. You know, I often have a special Christmas painting every year. And just, I think that's what motivates me, is just to see their reaction. I did this doctor at a hospital here. He was a brain surgeon, and he died of brain cancer. And so I did a posthumous portrait of him, and I unveiled it at the hospital, and his father and mother and his, you know, all the people he worked with saw it, and it was real quiet. And I, you know, usually I hear some applause or something, and I looked around and everybody was crying. And, you know, they really missed him. He was a great guy, apparently. I wish I never met him. So, you know, that was hard. But that's what makes portraits special. And yeah, I had somebody carry 2 portraits out when their house got on fire. Fortunately, it was just the kitchen, and they were able to extinguish it quickly. But they got the kids and the portraits out.
Melissa, I'm guessing as you do with the agencies, it's all definitely contract, but what about when personal work? How do you handle that?
Yes. So with pricing, it always has to be the same for me. You know, if it's on my website, that's the price that it is for everyone. And so if I have my own clients, obviously I make 40% more. And with the agency, I make 40% less. So that's a hard part too, because I would like to have more clients that aren't necessarily in the 1%. And I struggle with that a little bit. I raised my prices the most I think I ever have this year. So I went up about $1,300. So my prices are, can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
You can. Okay. I was going in and out again. So my prices now are $9,800 for a head and shoulder, $11,800 for a 3/4, and $13,800 for a full. And when I hear that, I think, whoa, that's a lot. And I think it's just so subjective pricing. Portrait prices are all over the boards, and they can be 25,000 and they can be 1,200. And I think it's just, you're putting a value on your own work. And sometimes it takes, I don't know if it's confidence or just the willingness to say, this is what I'm worth. And I think for a lot of us, for me, that's hard to do. But that's just part of it. And so far it's worked out for me. But yeah, for me, everybody is the same price.
When you have so many booked out in advance, Melissa, you're saying 1 to 2 years. How do you deal with the pressure of that mentally? Do you feel pressured? Does that affect you?
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. Some paintings come really magically and I can do them very quickly. And other times they don't. And typically I'm good at balancing that and I don't feel a lot of pressure. I did have a really weird last year where I had a painting that the reference I think was weird. I took, instead of using my camera, I used my iPhone and it seemed to distort it. And when I went to paint it, I couldn't paint it. And I painted it about 6 times over. And I finally told the client, I don't think I can do it. I think we need to use a different reference. And all my clients are super great and nice. And I think they're too nice because the client was like, no, we know you can do it. You've painted other paintings for us before. We'll give you all the time that you need. And so then I went back and I painted it about 6, 7, 8 more times. and I could. I guess I couldn't admit to myself that I just couldn't do it. And I'm sure a lot of you have that. And that's part of commission painting and painting a landscape or painting paintings that you can just quit when it doesn't work. And with a commission painting, you can't not do it. So that's the part that feels like work. And those are the paintings that I feel like I don't want to do this anymore. But those are very few and far between. And it was a learning experience for me to be better at communicating and just
Melissa, you
realize that I'm not a superwoman. And go ahead, Mark. Did you guys hear any of that?
There was a question in the comments related to geography and pricing. And I wanted to just, for my sake, I don't change my pricing over geography. It doesn't really matter where you're from. You pay the same price. And like Melissa, I put down my prices and those are my prices. And I give a discount. I do have a percentage discount I give if it's a family member. And I will give that to my very closest friends, those friends that are like your family. And then after that, it's just the price is the price, because I think you kind of start to get into what are my boundaries? And, I did this for this person, and should I do that for this person too? And what if they talk to each other? Yeah, for me, it's just, I keep it simple. These are the prices. And if I'm related to you, then you get a 20% discount. And, otherwise that's it. And so I feel like it keeps me from second guessing if I'm doing the right thing here or there. And I keep it the same thing across. There's no different price from, whether you're in Atlanta or you're in North Mississippi. And then, okay, so going back to what you were asking, Margaret. Okay, so I found for myself that your marketing, I feel like with marketing for me, it's like pulling on strings, kind of I get a lead, and then I see like if, is it going to like turn into something? But if it turns into something, or someone just comes to me and they commission a portrait, once somebody commissions a portrait, of course, like anyone, I want to make sure I want to make sure I'm really satisfied. I want to make sure they're really satisfied. And most of the time it turns into multiple commissions for that same family. So like in this case with what Margaret just put up on the screen, this is one family, and this is 5 sons and 1 grandson. And this was not a 1% family. The dad is like one of the dearest men I've ever known. I knew him from college. He remarried a woman she had 3 boys, he had 2 boys and a grandson. And he wanted to give these to her as a gift, as a surprise. So when I did their sittings, they were all like, we coordinated all of these, with the guys. I mean, it was easier because they're older, except for with the littlest one. And she didn't know that these sittings were going on. And we did them over the course of a number of months, and I painted them, and he gave them to her for Christmas. And it was really like so emotional for him and for her, and then like for me as the artist. But just kind of going back to the original point, a lot of times if I'm successful, like in, getting a commission with one family, it turns into the other children, and sometimes like another generation and that kind of thing. So all of these boys are brothers or stepbrothers. Yeah. So these 2 girls are from the same family, and I painted them at around the same age. So I didn't make these paintings at the same time, but I painted the little blonde girl in the blue dress first. She's the oldest. And then a couple of years later, I painted her little sister. And this is this is the family that commissioned this. It was my sister-in-law's sister, my brother's wife's sister. So a lot of these people that are commissioning paintings I'm close to in some way. So these 4 children are also siblings. And this actually was an opportunity to paint for a family that, was able to like buy the portraits that they wanted. And, just be able to go all out, which was really awesome for me because I love painting details. I love painting fabrics and textures. And so it was like this whole kind of thing, like the mom sent me, pictures of the dresses and all of it. And I got to paint all of them in the same year. This was an awesome job, and it was a really amazing family. I feel like when working with people, I feel like I always learn something from them about like, how things that I wish that I was. I feel like working with some of these families like makes me want to be a better person. And that's definitely the case with these people. But this was another, like, it wasn't 1 portrait, it was 4 portraits.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all actually of the families I put up, but that I sent to Margaret. But there, I was looking today at, photos I had since I didn't have my website up and available. And there were just multiple cases where there were, there's more than one involved, in a commission. And I was going to say that, one marketing idea is a lot of times people get asked to be involved in charity auctions or school auctions, things like that. And I've done some of those. I don't give away a whole painting for that. Usually I will give some kind of discount. Or, a gift certificate or something like that. So that way I'm still, because, painting portraits is not scalable. You can only do a certain number of portraits a year. And so like to give away like a whole portrait is for me, you know, a lot of yearly income. So I just can't afford to do that. And so I'll give a discount. And so usually that will, you know, that will bring a commission of some sort that I'm getting paid for with, you know, with a discount. And then in a lot of those cases, that those families too will say, well, I bought this at the school auction or the charity auction, and I want to have my oldest child painted. But then while we're at it, why don't you do our other child too? Because we can't just have one of our children painted. So that's like kind of another marketing tool that, you know, things start to like, they're like bubbles. And like sometimes you have like these like bubbles in a family where it can kind of grow and you know, it touches their friends. Or there, I also think of like geography bubbles. So, you know, you kind of get in maybe with some people in Birmingham or Auburn or, you know, a little town in North Mississippi or something like that. And then, you know, that can be like a little geography bubble for you. And you can go and do like an unveiling and ask the family if they want to invite their friends. And I know like right now there's not a lot of parties going on, but, you know, you can do something where, you know, you can even turn it into an opportunity to meet their friends and, you know, have a chance to kind of market yourself to more people. But every painting that you do is out there marketing itself for you in some way.
Right. I used to get involved in.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you a question, Mark, if no one else had questions. I'm in family portraits and I haven't done a lot of corporate. I wondered if you've done a lot of corporate, Mark, and if you could give us advice in terms of how you got into that and how you've pursued it.
I've done a few. I'm not that excited about it because usually you have to please the whole board, you know, a whole large group of people. And often they have their own portrait painters they want to recommend. And, you know, I did one for the Correction Corporation of America. It's called CORE now. Their headquarters are here in Nashville, private prisons. And I wasn't, you know, that excited about the company, but the guy that they wanted painted had just died and everybody loved him. And, you know, so I got a whole bunch of different pictures and, you know, did that. And they had the unveiling in a prison that was named after him. And, you know, but there weren't any prisoners in there yet. But boy, they've had all sorts of problems. And, you know, so there are some, I like universities. I'm a lifelong learner. I belong to a salon and we meet and have experts come. You know, the guy that developed the vaccine came and talked to us at Vanderbilt. And anyway, yeah, I do more. I like to have a one-to-one connection and just have a limited number of people to please and not the whole company. I know Michael, you know, Shane Neal, he seems to thrive on big audiences and, you know, pleasing, and he's very able to do that. And anyway, one thing I wanted to say about, you know, the procedure, I always have them pose, but I also, when they're not there, work from pictures I've taken. But I also, and I've got a big monitor. It's basically a HD TV that I put on an easel vertically or horizontally, whichever way the portrait goes. And then I can kind of work from that. But I often work from a whole bunch of different pictures. And I even ask them if they've got any favorite pictures of that person from any age in life, you know, from, you know, a child, a young adult, or whatever age they are, you know, just, and you start getting a feel for how they present themselves to the world. And often they have a certain way of, you know, it's the irregularities in the face that often portray the person. You know, too often people try and make everything symmetrical and the eyes the same size and all that. And that's something that you have to watch out for. So those little quirks that they do, over and over again, that, and then I try and portray a calm, almost like they're about to smile. I don't do teeth usually. I've done a few, but I hate to do that. One dentist, I did his 4 children, and I didn't show any teeth. Anyway, but too often that looks like a snapshot. Cheese. But if you can look like, I like to show almost those transition points where they're about to do something, they're about to smile, or they're smiling with their eyes more than everything else, and their posture and the way they hold their head, and where their attention is. Are they introspective, deep within their own thoughts, or are they very engaged with the viewer? I try and get some of that. Also, there's just so many things you can do. It's endless what you can try and do and learn how to do. And it's a lifelong learning process.
When you're doing, all of you, a question for all of you, when you have commissions scheduled so far out, like for children and things, do you wait? I mean, if you were scheduled for 1.5 years, you would wait closer to the time you're going to work on that portrait to go do the photo shoot, or?
Right.
Okay.
And with multiples, sometimes you'll do each child at the same age, or the 3 I just did, I did them all 3 within, bing, bing, bing. I did the oldest, and then I was going to do the next oldest, but he got COVID, so I had to go on to the youngest, and then he got COVID. So anyway, but they're all fine now. But that way I could show, how they are in relation to each other. But more often they want them at a particular age, and then you can space it out. I think the most commissions I've had was about 4 years worth. Since the last recession, not this current one, that kind of slowed down some, and I was kind of relieved. And now I don't have anything to paint right now, so I'm taking the time to do the website and the business cards, and also I'm scanning my parents, my mother's journals. She journaled for all her life, and took, my father was a great picture taker, so we've got many albums, and I'm scanning all those for my siblings, and just kind of looking back at my life, and where have I been, what have I done, who have I known. A lot of them are gone now, unfortunately, so that I have a better sense of where I'm going and what I want to do in the remaining time that I've got. Hopefully I'll live as long as my mother, who died almost at 98. So anyway, it's all perspective.
And I would just, for as far as answering, your question, Margaret, I have a lot of people that like to do milestone portraits. So, age 13, my kids are all getting their portrait done at age 13, or 4. Age 4 is like a big age, that I get. And then another one is senior year in high school. And in those cases, if I'm booked out, far, let's say they're 13 now, or they're turning 13 next month, but I can't paint it for more than a year, I will go ahead and do the sitting then. So I, have the reference information, like what all I need captured for them at the age that the family wanted them to be painted. But sometimes, people, like, they know in advance, and they're like, well, please put me on your list for, spring of 2023, because that's when my next one will be 13. So then, you can plan for it better. But I've definitely had times where I go out of order from the sitting to the painting, because there's like a time sensitivity there.
I've heard some people say they won't paint children that are like less than 5 years old. Do you guys have any set rules that you go by, a certain age that you won't paint or that you?
No, if they want to be painted, I paint them.
Either. And I
I
think
haven't painted babies. I haven't really painted any babies. I don't know about you guys.
that's what I was going to say is I think there's a market out there.
Yeah, I think
But
there is.
that's another thing that you see, like it's interesting to pay attention to what is happening in photography, because there's so many people that do these beautiful photo portraits now of infants like swaddled up or like kind of in the fetal position on their bellies, with the nice like family heirloom blanket and all that. And I've seen some really beautiful classical portraits of babies done by some amazing artists. And I always think, well, that's a whole market for someone to paint infants, and especially if you love painting skin. And I've never done it, but that's something there for someone.
As long as they can
more
sit
mother and
still enough.
child or more. Yeah, I mean that's the thing with the baby. They've got to be hard to photograph. I mean, 3-year-olds are hard enough. I can't imagine understanding the baby.
I say 4 to 6 is as about as young as I've done. As they have to be able to hold attention at least for a few minutes, and then come back to that position, whatever. I had one little boy. He was beautiful, but he was learning disabled and in a special school, that was like $40,000 a semester for elementary school. Anyway, he just couldn't sit still, and he would just get up and run around the house screaming, outside. And his dog was much better behaved. Anyway, so finally he got to a point where he could sit still for, I don't know how long it took, but I took a whole bunch of pictures, and he was pretty good. He'd been, I guess the school had helped him. And we kept trying for, several years actually, until he was at the point where, he could cooperate and understand. You have to be flexible and very patient.
I think it's hard to get young children to pose. But, really then, like when I painted that family that, Margaret was showed of the 6 boys, all of the older ones like sat for me to do like an alla prima color study. And we spent, hours together talking. With the 2-year-old, I came in there and I got the photos I needed really fast. And then, I got to spend some time playing with him, like when the pressure was off. But it's a different experience trying to, do a portrait. It's very, like, for me, very, much more photo based. But I would still do it. And you can still sit with them and like mix skin tones and, do some little color studies, which, is kind of fascinating to them. Sometimes it's like the stillest they'll be is watching you mix paint up.
Until they try and get into the mixing themselves.
There is, this is like not really related to a specific marketing thing, but it was something that I got to thinking about today. It's how important it is to love people. When you're a portrait artist, I think it is. And I was listening to this podcast with a figurative artist I really like. It's Stephen Assail. He's, different kind of art, but it's, he's one of my favorite artists. And he was talking about how he can tell, or he feels like he can often tell when he looks at a figurative portrait or a painting or a portrait, whether or not the artist loves people. Do they like people or not? And he was kind of pressed a little bit, and he named some names of some, historical artists. He's like, I don't really think this artist liked people that much. But I think it's really important when you're, a portrait painter to cultivate it. like to cultivate the, the curiosity. And for me, sometimes it has to do with like what I'm willing to feed myself out, like mentally feed myself outside of, the studio at all. Because like if you go and you spend a lot of time on Twitter, you think humanity's horrible, like everyone's terrible and look what they're all doing and so on. So sometimes like, I think, kind of like the way that you nourish your mind is pretty important too. Like just giving, being able to like love people for who they are, and, all of our, the wonderful things about us, and, all of our quirks. But I do like to really kind of think about, like successes, some of the wonderful things about humanity and what we've done, and not like dwell forever in, what you can kind of get into on social media, which is like a whole lot of badness.
Yeah. I try and, most of my portraits are looking out at the viewer, and I want them, to elicit a good emotional response of at least affection, if not love. And I try to paint them like they're looking, like that woman I painted for her husband for Christmas. The whole time I was picturing her looking at him with love. And I think I really captured that. And that's what really got to him. And so, and I also try and, it's almost like, how does God see people? How does he loves them? And so I try, sometimes there are people that I don't really agree with politically. I painted a couple recently that they have factories all over the world. He has 600 patents. They're extremely wealthy, but it's all technical and, money. And, but they were high school sweethearts. And so I painted their love for each other. Okay.
Another question for you guys about, I guess, camera equipment.
Okay. I use a Canon.
Got a few minutes left.
70D or something.
I use the same thing, a Canon 70D, and I wouldn't buy that camera now if I was buying a new camera. I think I could probably get a better camera on eBay or something like that. But it's a good camera, and it's, the color is beautiful. I don't ever use iPhone. I don't ever use an iPhone. So yeah, I take my camera and I usually set it up on a tripod when I work. And that way I'm not looking through the lens at the person. Like I can make eye contact with them and have a conversation with them, and I can just be like snapping the photos. I mean, there's a disadvantage to that because your lens is, your camera's stable. So maybe especially if it's a young person and they're moving around a bit, you're not as flexible. But I just feel like it's more personal. You can look at someone and, you can have a conversation. You can see their face, with your own eyes. And then you're just like, you can kind of snap through your camera at different moments.
And I like the fact that you can set it up so that you can see what the camera is seeing with your iPad or your iPhone, and even click the camera by touching your iPhone or iPad. And so I do that a lot, especially if it's a child, and here I am scrunched down on the ground, practically with a tripod and the camera at their level. And I'm, it hurts my back to scrunch up like that. So this way I keep saying, now look at the camera, look into the camera, but I can be standing somewhere else. And I did this guy up in a tree, and I had to get either way up on a ladder to get up there to take a picture of him, or, I could just have a really tall tripod and have it way up there. And then I was down on the ground and I could click away.
also have a question about working from life. I know it's not feasible a lot of times, but do you, all three of you, do you work from life if it's preferred, or depends on the subject?
I insist on it. That couple, the industrialists, they would fly in every, few months or weeks, and it took a long time, but they were old and they didn't change much.
I do. If I have someone that's old enough to sit for me, I will ask for a 3-hour period so I can do like just an alla prima color study. It's not it's not like a beginning for the portrait. Like, I'm not going to build the portrait on top of that. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to take it with my photos, and I'm going to use them together as information to start afresh on the next portrait. If I have someone that's too young and I can't get a 3-hour time for them to sit with me, then I'll still do like just kind of color mixtures. I'll mix up the colors while I'm looking at them and match them to their skin. But it's, it's nice when someone's old enough to sit for you, because more than just getting the chance to like paint them from life, even if it's, a study for something later, you get the 3 hours to talk to them while you're making this painting. And you get like, there's, someone was like, oh, you're like a portrait artist and a shrink. So, I was like, it's like, you get to be like a therapist. No, I'm just kidding. Like, not that I'm solving problems, but, you
Right.
really, like, it's nice. You get this one-on-one time with people and you get to know them. And then they get to, see, be a part of the process in that way. But I don't paint from life in terms of what the finished product is. And I think that's also like a really interesting niche for someone too. If you were really, did alla prima portraits and that was your thing, like to be able to spend 4 or 5 hours with someone and do a beautiful head study, that's a great thing to kind of have as your, marketing and as your niche, and be able to go do that and have that be your product.
And I don't paint from life. I find that with little children, I barely get enough time with them to photograph them. So years ago, I painted from life, but people now barely give you enough time to photograph them. So it's
Right.
sort of a different world. I'm sure, Mark, you have experienced a change of the world.
Oh, their schedules are incredible. Even the kids, they've got every minute of their day scheduled.
Yeah.
We've got some questions here. I'm going to throw a couple out for you guys. This one is, what have been some of your biggest technical challenges in painting portraits, like capturing likenesses and things like that? And a technical challenge. And then it may relate to this other question from someone that says, from Lee Jordan, who says, what is your favorite tool that is not paint or a brush? Two interesting questions there.
So for me, technical, I probably wouldn't talk about something specific, but if you're going to be a portrait artist, I think you sort of have to have thick skin and be able to take critiques in terms of a likeness. And I think a parent probably knows their child best. And so when they say the mouth isn't quite right or the nose isn't quite right, they're usually right, unfortunately. And so that's part of the business that is not so fun. For me, I probably make adjustments 50% of the time, I guess. And so I email the image and ask if the likeness is there and if they have any comments, and then they'll say something's not quite right, or they don't know what it is. So that sometimes it makes it not quite so fun, because I just like to paint a painting and be done. Right now in the studio, I have about 6 portraits that need adjustments, and I'm trying to love adjustments. I'm trying to love it.
Well, often it's a minor adjustment.
It is.
Not just a little almost I don't know, the slightest little thing can change the expression. And often when they say it's the mouth, it's not really the mouth. It's the space between the mouth and the nose, or, the roundness of the muzzle, or I don't know. You think, okay, that's the area that they've focused on, but what is it around there that could be contributing? And also, if something is a little too noticeable, sometimes you have to understate it a little, and not make it so prominent, especially noses.
Mark, what's your percentage of making adjustments, or Holly? Approximately?
I never stop. I mean, I'll get a show and there'll be something that's been bothering me, and I'll go ahead and fix it. And, I don't even tell them, and they'll say, oh, it looks a little different. Yeah, I cleaned the glass over the pastel, or, something else, and they never mind. But, sometimes the belt buckle was too shiny, and that's what your eye looked at instead of the face, and so I do things like that. I'm never pleased.
Yeah. And you're still going, and are you still loving portraits?
Oh, yes, I do.
That's awesome.
It's a whole nother world, and you can leave all the troubles of the world behind, which is nice. Although I tend to listen to NPR while I'm painting, and so I stay in touch with the world, and they have a lot of good, positive things. I try and focus on that, and not the craziness.
I guess this could be our last question here tonight, and it's going to be a hard one because I know it would vary widely, but what is, I think this is Paul, wants to know what time is spent on an average portrait? And I guess that would vary on the size and complexity. And
so for me, I paint about 20 portraits a year. And so I tried to do a portrait in approximately 2 weeks. If it's magical, and if I paint it over 11 times, obviously it takes a lot more than 2 weeks. But I'm very early, so that would be my answer.
I've done maybe 10, but I'm down to about 5 or 6 now a year. I've slowed down. But also I like to take my time. That panther took about 3 months, but I was also studying panthers and mountains and Greek mythology and archetypes and all these other things while I was taking care of my mother, who was dying for several months, and I couldn't be painting because I was staying with her. And so, a whole lot of preparation went into that. So when I actually started painting, it all came together. But it was a big project, yeah.
Holly, do you know how many you do a year, or how long an average one takes?
Well, I mean, it depends. It's like varies a lot depending on what kind of portrait it is. So the images that were full body portraits with a lot of detail, those were, like, I could probably not do more. I could not do more than 6 of those a year. If it's head and shoulders and, there's no background, I could probably do 20 of those in a year. So that's kind of like roughly what it takes for me. I'm like very, I think all artists are like this. Like, I have a process, but I also feel like I'm always fidgeting with my process a little bit because it feels boring to do it the same way every time to me. And so I think I could probably go a little bit faster if I wasn't always kind of like, well, let me, wonder, what if I underpainted in red this time? And kind of building up on something maybe a little different. But that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more thing to ask you guys. Everett is one of our new younger members, and he wants to know what would be the best advice you could give to an aspiring young artist.
I would say don't be afraid to talk to people and ask questions and get a mentor. Years ago, Carol Kirby was my mentor, and that changed my life. So I would say network, talk to people, and paint a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I break up again?
Yeah, a little bit, but we got it.
That's awesome advice. And
Yeah.
I would second that. And the other thing I would say is, just on another note, another bit of advice is to really know your stuff as much as you can. Like find out about your materials. I mean, I think some of this is because I still really like science, and, I come from a math background, but I really like to know like the chemistry of how you put this together to make a painting that has integrity, that's going to last for, I tell people like, we're doing a painting of your 13-year-old now, and his grandson is, may have that on his wall one day. So, these paintings will outlive me, and they will outlive them, even when they're little kids. And so, there are a lot of good resources there. I mean, my favorite is natural pigments and the writings that George O'Hanlon does. And I took one of his workshops at one point, which is a lot. But it just taught me so much how to make sure I'm building a painting that has integrity, the best surfaces to use, the best, which pigments stand the test of time, and all of that. Yes, definitely. I'll post the name in the chat. And also, I think this carries a long way when you're talking to your clients as well, because when they see how much, you know about your craft, like the craft side of it, they feel like they're in really good hands. And, and then it also kind of goes back to like conveying like this love of like what you do, and, the beauty of what goes into making a painting. So there's a lot I didn't know early on. And, I made some paintings that, I mean, not necessarily like portraits or anything, but there's some things I wish I'd learned sooner rather than later.
Yeah, the natural pigments, they have the course online now. It's over somewhere between $200 and $300, I think, and another a couple hundred for materials. But I learned a lot, and I did that, I think, last year. Everybody's doing everything online now, and I love that. I don't have to go anywhere. I can do this and be here.
Guys, that's been great. Does anybody else have any final questions before we end for tonight?
You know what? Can I say one other thing? As
Yeah.
far as size, I think, even though I think so much of most of modern portraiture, I think, is done from photos, I do think painting from life is just that you cannot paint from life enough. And it's because of, what you learn and the way, you can see, you're looking at the head and the body more in 3 dimensions than you are looking at it that's already flattened out for you. And, you're building your knowledge of anatomy. But I also think that it's like the experience of painting from life is so different than the experience of painting in your studio. And like, for me, if I feel like stale or, I just need like more life in what I'm doing. I mean, even plein air painting is awesome. And plein air painting is great for you if you paint people outdoors with backgrounds. But painting like a model from life is, you just cannot do that enough, no matter if you're a beginning artist or if you've been painting for 50 years.
I went to the Florence Academy of Art and studied anatomy and landscape painting, and I really enjoyed that. But boy, it was during the summer, It was just the summer course, and it was so hot. I couldn't have survived without gelato. I had several a day, and I'm not sure I could do it now because it's getting hotter and hotter there. And they don't have air conditioning, and a lot. Anyway, and I'm not very good at.
Still have gelato.
Yeah, I love it, but I'm not, I don't. I wish I could do plein air more, but I don't like being outside. I am so fair skinned. I don't do well in the sun. And I also have something where, it's not COVID, but I get these coughing fits and I tend to get those outside. I guess I'm allergic. Uh-oh, my battery's almost gone.
I
Okay.
think Everett has his hand raised.
It's really been great to see everybody and you guys.
Yeah.
Everett, did you have a question before do you have your hand raised?
Yeah. I sorry, I just wanted to get all the questions out while you guys are all here. First of all, thanks for speaking. It's nice to get all the knowledge from all you guys. But I had a question. I have a full-time job, and that's not painting. But I'm looking to, further down the road, I really want to try to make that transition. And I was wondering if, for those of you that had started off in the corporate world, making that transition over into the art world, like what sort of recommendations do you have for that?
So when I did that, it took some years for me to transition from corporate world to, painting full time. And I'll just tell you like some of the things that I did along the way. So, I was painting whenever I could outside of work, and I was studying, I was learning as much as I could. And that went on for a few years. And at some point I just kind of started opening myself up to commissions, and trying to really kind of actively trying to get commissions. I think I wanted to test the ground to see to see what would happen. Would I get any commissions? What would it be like? And I started accepting some commissions, and some of them are things that I probably, are very different than what I do now. But, I was really open to a variety of things. But I found at some point, I don't know what kind of work you do, but at some point I found an opportunity in my company to work in a part-time role. And if that's something that's ever available to you in your industry, at your company, or, maybe even, in a different place with your skill set, it would be something that would be interesting to kind of look out for, because that way you can kind of have your feet in two places at once if you don't feel like, you're ready to go all the way there yet. And it would open up your time more for painting. You'd have more time to work as an artist, but then you'd also still have the skills that you use and that you've built in the corporate world, and you can kind of test it out. That worked well for me because it gave me the confidence to kind of go all the way when I did. But I think if I had, maybe decided it wasn't the right move, I wasn't so far kind of stepped out of the corporate world that I couldn't have, gone back into a full-time capacity. I didn't jump off a cliff. I think different people have a different appetite for that. It depends maybe on your risk tolerance. And my risk tolerance was not, some people would have just gone for it. And so some of it is maybe knowing yourself and what level of anxiety it might give you to kind of fully step away. Or, is there a way you can kind of be part way in and part way out for a little while? Like freelance, maybe work as a contractor somewhere, and still paint more or something like that.
Well, I painted since I was a child, and then went to college and studied architecture, and then Did that for 10 years with the restaurants and worked 20-hour days for hardly any time off, and burned out basically and sold everything. And so I didn't really have to work when I was, 30 anymore, at least for a while. So I just, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do next. And I just started drawing people, and, one thing quickly led to another. And, I thought, how does anybody ever, establish a career while they're doing a job? I couldn't imagine doing that. I had to do it fully. So I don't know whether that's possible, but I admire people who can do both, especially mothers. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I kind of had that experience. I worked in a corporate job for about 9 months, and I was going to go home and paint paintings in the evening. And in 9 months, I had painted one painting, and I said,
Right.
it's now or never. And I lived at home until I was 25. So I made sure that I didn't have a mortgage and I didn't have a family. So I could make that decision. So I quit my job and said, I'm going to do it now. And because I had seen a lot of friends that graduated with art degrees that weren't doing art. And I wanted to do art. So I made that decision really early on. But it's transitioned to like Holly, where I was painting murals, but I wanted to paint portraits and I wanted to be in galleries. So I was networking. So the people that I was meeting, I was showing my portfolio to. And I made sure to meet a lot of people and to put myself out there and to find mentors, and to be in the art world. Just go and go back. You can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's tremendous opportunities out there now that, Mark, you didn't have as a young guy growing up that we have. I mean, it's a world
Oh, yeah.
for our taking. The possibilities right now are endless.
Oh, my father, he was a realist painter, and he was really good, but modern art was the only thing going then. I think there was one a realist painter making a living at the time, and he tried to, it was very discouraging to him. And we've got it made. I mean, realism is back full steam. So yeah, we are lucky. And you have to.
Everett, I would say I would mentor you if you want to come out and see me in my studio. I think people are willing to do that if you ask.
Oh, yeah.
And I certainly am willing.
Wow. Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Call me
I
anytime.
mentored Michael Shea Neal when he was a student. He came out because I was the only artist that he knew that actually made a living just doing art and not
Awesome.
teaching or anything else.
I might be calling you, Mark. We're artists. We're all lonely out here. I mean, we want to be
so
with
much.
people.
It was so fun, when I first started getting paid, doing something I loved. I couldn't believe you could actually do that.
Yeah.
And I got used to it real fast.
That's great. That's great. And that's such a generous offer, you guys. Honestly, Everett, welcome to the Portrait Society.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
And
it.
if if anybody ever comes to Nashville, stop, give me a call.
I too would love to have visitors. So Everett,
Making some rounds.
reach out to me and anyone else that was,
Well, I've gone ahead and followed both of you on Instagram, so.
Oh, good. Then I can find you too.
Yes. Yes. I just, so I actually only started art about a year ago. I started drawing I started training with Chris Demizio. I live in Roswell. And it's a year's gone by, and I think I've picked up a lot of speed, and I think that I've kind of found my passion. And I'm very serious about it, and I love it. And so much so that I also started training with Jeff Hine. I don't know if anyone's familiar with him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
So, and I really like training with both of them. So, yeah, and I've noticed a lot of progress in the past year. So I'm really excited to see, what's in store for the future.
I think like Melissa said, paint, paint, paint. Draw, draw,
Yeah.
draw.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
you will approve.
And you have great teachers, so,
Yes,
you're
yeah.
going to
a good teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
and practicing what you're learning from them. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised at all that you're, exponentially just getting better and better.
And I would say too, when you said that, Everett, about training with people, the Portrait Society has been awesome. When I got out of school, they had a workshop that I took, and I learned more in 4 days than I did in 4 years in college. Just training with a professional artist, I will tell you, is the absolute best thing you can ever do, is real artists that are out there working. I mean, absolutely more than I did in college in 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. I was lucky enough to take a workshop recently with Jerry Salinas, and it was just like I said, it's been a day, and it's a huge difference. Working with somebody who does portraits all the time, and can really help you see things that you may not have, and help you hone what you're doing.
Yeah, it's exponential. That's awesome.
Well,
And
guys,
reach out to all the other artists.
yes. And I appreciate everybody tonight coming, and start the video here. And I hope we'll see everybody soon.
Yeah.
Next month, maybe. I hope so. Yeah. Thank you, guys. I guess Mark's battery
Thank
died.
you.
Seems to be gone already.
Thank
But
you.
thank you all.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
It was wonderful. Thank you. That was
Thank
great.
Thank you.
Informative.
You guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.